One thing that I want to see, this just came up. David Cameron. David Cameron used to be the like prime minister of the UK. Is that right? Served as a foreign secretary. I feel like, wasn't he the prime minister? Or was he not? Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was the prime minister. He was the prime minister. But he's not anymore. I want to see. I'm taking a look at this. I'm taking a look at everything just to make sure I got this right. Leader of the opposition, prime minister. He was the foreign secretary since 2023. Okay. And he was prime minister from 2010 to 2016. Okay. Yeah. Oh, this is the guy that started Brexit, right? This is the guy that was the guy that started Brexit. And then like 17 prime ministers later, the United Kingdom is almost completely destroyed. Oh, it's that guy. This guy's gonna go down in the history books as the guy who like obliterated what was left of it who obliterated what was left of the UK. And that's kind of hilarious. Yeah, the guy who gave into the far right and started the Brexit vote. Yeah, and then when the going got tough, he decided to get going. Crazy stuff. Just if you ever wanted to see this guy get grilled, if you hate this guy and you ever wanted to see him get grilled, don't worry, everybody else did as well. So they dragged him in front of a select committee and they started grilling him on Israel Gaza and asking him questions about it and about Israel's genocide of the Gazan people. And bro almost got broke in half. Look at this. It's pretty interesting stuff.
Make our case very vigorously, as I do. I mean, when I meet, for instance, South African foreign minister, or talk to them, I would say, look, of course, I want this conflict to end as soon as possible. I don't want to go on for a moment longer than necessary. But a ceasefire to work has got to be sustainable. That means you can't have Hamas in power, able to launch rockets, not releasing hostages. That has got to be dealt with. And I think you get...
On that, Foreign Secretary, do you believe that military intervention can defeat Hamas?
I think that what the Israelis are trying to do... is they are trying to get rid of Hamas's ability
to
launch further attacks on Israel. I think you can do that.
No, their objective was to destroy Hamas. It's not to stop Hamas from shooting rockets. It's to destroy Hamas because they're blowing up places that aren't places where Hamas is shooting rockets from. That's not their goal. It's to kill everybody who's affiliated with Hamas. That's their goal. It's their stated goal. Like they've been stating this goal since the beginning of the war. Why in the world would you just like pretend that's not what they're doing?
And one can disagree, and I would have differences with the way they've gone about it. Can you defeat an ideology through armed intervention? No, defeating an ideology is going to take a lot of other things, including progress towards a political solution to show that politics can work and deliver things. But I think that if you take the argument there's nothing more that can be done militarily, you just have to freeze things where we are now, you've then got to make an argument, well, how do you get the remainder of Hamas out of Gaza, get rid of the rocket launchers, get rid of my challenge to those from the Global South or friends in Arab states is to say, okay, there's a ceasefire tomorrow. How do you get rid of Hamas's capacity to launch more rockets?
How will you know when that moment has come as British Foreign Secretary? And is it your hope that the UK will be voting for a ceasefire at the UN in the near future?
I would hope that we'll be voting. I mean, what we did is we defined what we wanted as a sustainable ceasefire. The Prime Minister said that at Prime Minister's questions, and within a few weeks that was adopted by the UN in Resolution 2720 with unanimous, not unanimous agreement because the United States didn't vote in favour, but without a veto. So that's our position. Yes, I look forward to the moment when this conflict is over. And of course, we spend a lot of time asking what is...
Wait a second. Is this true? I'm hearing a report. There are people saying that there's a news article out about the IDF being commanded to use their Hannibal procedure, which means that they didn't want any Hamas militants to return to Gaza, even if they had hostages. So just they were given the green light to just kill anybody and everybody if they were near a Hamas militant. Okay. Wait, I'm not sure if that's true. Let's see. Article from the Cradle. All right. Israeli army ordered mass Hannibal directive on October 7th. An investigation from Israel's leading newspaper indicates Israel deliberately killed many of its own civilians and soldiers during Hamas's operation in Al-Aqsa flood to prevent them from being taken back to Gaza. So like just to prevent them from being taken captive, you just kill them instead. So to make sure no militants get back into Gaza, you just kill them and kill the hostages as well. The Israeli military implemented the Hannibal directive during Hamas's attack on October 7th, killing many of its own civilians and soldiers, according to an investigation by Israel's leading newspaper, I can't pronounce this, which will be published in full on January 12th. So that's tomorrow. So this is a leak right now. This is a leak right now. So we'll have to read the full paper when it comes out, if it comes out, but we'll see. The Hebrew edition of the paper wrote on the 11th that one of the revelations revealed in the investigation is that at midnight on October 7th, the IDF Israeli military ordered all of its combat units to practice the use of the Hannibal procedure, although without clearly mentioning this explicitly by name. The order was to stop at all costs an attempt for Hamas terrorists to return to Gaza, that is, despite the fear that some of them may have abductees, the paper wrote. The Times of Israel described the Hannibal procedure or directive as allowing soldiers to use potentially massive amounts of force to prevent a soldier from falling into the hands of the enemy. This includes the possibility of endangering the life of the soldier in question in order to prevent his capture. Previous Haaretz investigation of the directive concluded that from the point of view of the army, a dead soldier is better than a captive soldier who himself suffers and forces the state to release thousands of captives in order to obtain his release. During the October 7th attack, Hamas and other Palestinians successfully took some 240 Israeli soldiers and civilians from settlements known as kibbutzim, and military bases back to Gaza as captives. Hamas hoped to exchange them for thousands of Palestinians, including women and children, held in Israeli prisons, Palestinian hostages, just so you know. Hamas used Toyota pickup trucks and motorcycles with which they entered Israel and stolen settlements, the captives that they brought back to Gaza. In the week after the attack, soldiers and elite units checked about 70 vehicles that were left in the area between the settlements and the Gaza Strip. These vehicles did not reach that did not reach Gaza because they're on their because they were because on the way they were shot by a combat helicopter, an anti-tank missile, or a tank. At least in some cases, everyone in the vehicle was killed. As journalist Dan Cohen reported, the Israeli military killed Efrat Katz, age 68, as she was being taken captive from a kibbutz to Gaza on a cart pulled by a tractor on October 7th. Her daughter, Doron Katz Asher, and two grandchildren, Raz, age 2, and Aviv, age 4, were also in the cart. Doron later told Israel's Channel 12 that the Israeli military opened fire on the tractor, injuring her two daughters and killing her mother. As previously reported by the Cradle, Israeli Air Force Reserve Colonel Nof Erez. Listen, these names are crazy, to me at least. I speak English. Described Israel's actions on the 7th as a mass Hannibal event in response to the use of the Apache helicopters and tanks. What we saw was a mass Hannibal. There are many openings in the fence, thousands of people, and many different vehicles with hostages and some without, he told Haaretz. Now, the revelation that the Israeli military informally issued a Hannibal directive raises many questions about the deaths of many Israeli civilians who were initially presumed to be taken captive on October 7th, but whose bodies were later discovered near the Gaza border fence. Yeah, I think that's a big thing. Yeah, I think that this is something that we've been seeing a lot, is that from October 7th onward, the amount of hostages and people taken ballooned and then shrunk. right? Like now the number that you'll see a lot of people defending Israel will say is like 1,200 people were killed. But then what's the actual number is 800 civilians were killed and about 200 or so soldiers were killed that are claimed to be from Gaza militants, from like, you know, Hamas militants. But that number even keeps changing, especially as they went through all the things, all the tractors, all the cars, all the people that they shot. They realized that they killed I heard claims that they've killed a bunch of their own hostages and their own soldiers, specifically just so they won't be taken captive, because they didn't want to have to argue for them to be taken back. They didn't want to argue for them to be, you know, or haggle for them to be returned. So they just decided to kill them instead. That'd be the better option. When I was making videos about this topic, and when I make videos about this topic, I haven't said that. I didn't bring it up much. Well, I think I brought it up in the sense of it's something that I heard, but I had no clue if it was true or not. So I just said these are claims coming out, and it seems to have some truth behind it, but, you know, take it with a grain of salt. It seems like it's starting to come out that there's more and more information out, and now there's going to be a large article written about how Israel did in fact decide to kill many of its own civilians just so they wouldn't be taken hostage. It's possible. I mean, it's very possible that Israel has killed more of its own hostages than Hamas has at this point.
Israel should do next to bring this to an end, to finish we should also spend a nanosecond saying if Hamas wanted, they could end this tomorrow. They could lay down their arms. They could leave Gaza. You know, they are the ones prolonging this conflict in many ways.
You've warned.
I don't know. I just don't believe that this is true. Like, I've heard people say that, like, oh, Hamas could just end the war by just like stop existing. But I just don't believe this is true. I don't think Israel would ever really stop bombing. I don't think they would really stop bombing until they feel personally satisfied, because they would just say that there are more Hamas militants out there. Their goal is to kill every single Hamas militant, right? Like, why in the world would they think that? Why in the world would they just be like, oh yeah, they're definitely telling the truth here? They would just keep bombing. I just don't believe that if there was a mass surrender by Hamas militants that they would just stop bombing. For one, I think they would try to bomb the people surrendering, and then they would just keep bombing. They've displaced Gaza, which is the real objective. 85% of the population in Gaza has been displaced so far.
I don't want this to go on. No, what I'd say, first of all, I would be in favour of humanitarian pauses, including right now. I mean, let's have another pause to try and get hostages out and to get more aid in. I'd be happy for us to do that now. What I'm saying about sustainable ceasefire is it does need Hamas to no longer be capable of launching attacks into Israel. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. And I hope that moment comes as quickly as possible.
Francis, just to take you back for a moment, what is the UK's current legal position on whether or not Gaza is occupied?
Our position is that Israel is fighting a campaign against Hamas. We have to check regularly whether that is in compliance with international humanitarian law and assess that. I don't think Israel regards itself as an occupying force, but whether that is correct, I would want to take legal advice, because this comes to this issue about aid, where I think Israel needs to do more, a lot more, to get more aid into Gaza, which perhaps we can come on to.
And forgive me, we know that Israel does not consider itself to be an occupying power, but British law currently does consider Gaza to be an occupied power. Can you, an occupied territory? Can you just confirm that on the record?
I don't know the precise legal definition of that. I'd have to go back and check.
Philip? I think we all know that the Foreign Office does know what the official legal position is.
We describe the territories as the occupied Palestinian territories, but
that's a different question.
That's a descriptor.
Yes.
Yeah.
We should give you a piece of written advice on the legal position.
I think.
Wait, we call them the occupied territories, but we don't know if they're actually occupied territories. That's what we just call them. Okay. Okay. All right. Sure. All right, buddy. Sure. Listen. I call her my wife. All right. I mean, that's just what I call her. Whether we're like actually married, that's a whole nother question. I mean, come on. What are you talking about, man? What are you referring to? What are you even talking about? If you call them occupied territories, how do you not consider them occupied territories? You just like to call them occupied for fun, even though you disagree with that?
What the chair's asking is, do we consider Gaza to be occupied militarily at the moment? Is that what you're getting at?
I'm asking for the British government's legal definition, whatever they consider to be the terminology of you occupy, because as I understand it, there is no question that in law, under British law and according to the UN Security Council Relation 22334, on which we have based our legal position, Gaza is an occupied territory, and therefore from that, Israel does have obligations as an occupying power, whether or not they consider it to be or not. British law does state that, and I would consider it to be quite fundamental that we knew exactly from what premise we were operating when engaging in something so complex.
As you know, we refer to them as the occupied Palestinian territories, but obviously Gaza was left by Israel. But I think the question you're asking now is what Israel's done, is that technically an occupation, and therefore do they have legal obligation? The point I would make is, look, whether or not they are de jure...
Is this South Africa versus Israel stuff? No, this is Daniel Cameron, former Prime Minister of the UK and former Foreign Secretary in the UK, being grilled by a select committee on his personal opinions on what's going on in Gaza and Israel. So no, we're not there yet, but we're gonna be watching that after this. He's not used to people pulling receipts on his ass. Yeah.
Occupying, they are de facto occupying Gaza, and therefore when it comes to this issue of aid delivery, we need them to do more. At the moment we're at about 150 trucks a day getting into Gaza. We need to be closer to 500 every day.
Wow, that's like really low.
500, we're going to have more people going hungry, we're going to have more people getting disease. There is a danger of there being really widespread hunger. At the moment, something like 90% of Gazans are getting less than one meal a day.
This meme is very real.
Wow, that's really bad. So you're telling me an entire like 2 million people could be at risk of starving? That is total me when I'm not committing a genocide, okay? Just so you know.
Israel is a whole set.
I didn't even know that statistic. I'm glad we're taking a look at this, because I actually didn't even know that statistic off the top of my head. That 90% of Gazans aren't even getting one meal a day. Oh, wait, I want to hear that one more time.
Of there being really widespread hunger. At the moment, something like 90% of Gazans are getting less than one meal a day.
Oh, that's even worse than I thought. 90% of Gazans are getting less than one meal a day. You could easily be put into starvation. That's like 2 million people at the risk of starvation, is it not? Yeah, so Israel's stopping food from going into Gaza and constantly bombing them. And any gathering of Gazans is getting bombed. And so 90% of them are getting less than one meal a day to eat. And it's been months. At some point, there's going to be pictures and videos of people just like laying dead in the street due to mass starvation. It's going to look like the British. Oh my gosh, it's going to look like the British Raj. It's going to look like scenes of the street of like the streets during the British Raj. Epidemiologists are getting concerned that there's going to be it's Bengal famine. Oh my gosh, the America is helping British people do another Bengal famine, but this time in Gaza. They're going to do it to the Palestinians. Are you guys ready for the Bethlehem famine?
And so I've set out with the Israelis a whole set of things that could happen, that they could do that would make a real difference. Make sure Kerem Shalom is open 7 days.
It's going to look like Auschwitz. Yeah, it's really curious how that works out, isn't it?
A week. Make sure.
I've actually seen pictures of, alleged pictures of Gazans who look like they came from Auschwitz already.
I think I would also pay credit at this point to you, Foreign Secretary, for what the UK government has clearly done on aid. There is clearly much progress made as a result of that. But just for clarification, therefore, your words, Gaza is de facto occupied, and therefore Israel has obligations as an occupying power, which you are saying today you accept, at least when it
I'm
comes to
saying
aid,
they
not
have.
beyond.
I'm not a
They
lawyer,
have-
so
no, no,
I need to be
but
careful. I'm
you are
saying they
accepting
have
not met
responsibilities.
their obligations.
No, I'm saying they've got responsibilities to make sure that aid gets through. It's not solely them. There are also, I've been to El Arish myself. There are problems with Egyptian bureaucracy. There's problem with the lack of sort of overseeing logistics, working out what aid is going where. There are other bottlenecks, but fundamentally there are some things the Israelis need to do because ultimately they have a lot of responsibility for what is happening in Gaza. I'm not giving you a legal definition because I'm not a lawyer. This is a moral and political point.
They are
Responsibilities.
They are not currently doing all they could be doing on aid, and therefore what
I
they
want
should
them
be
to do
doing.
more.
Moving to the conduct of the military operation,
I'm going to speed this up a little
Your
bit.
assessment of Hamas's current capability, how much it's been degraded, and what their intent is.
I have to be careful what I say, but I mean, I've seen figures suggesting that they have lost well over 50% of their capacity and capability in terms of being able to launch rockets and all the rest of it. I don't think I can go further than that. But their ability to launch rockets into Israel has been significantly degraded. But as we've seen, they have still launched rockets in recent days.
Wait a second. So you've killed 1% of all Gazans, completely leveled northern Gaza, and Hamas still has about 50% left power, 50% power left from like, and that's from the Israelis. And so that's like, so you should be cautious with those numbers. So let's just say like they have about 50% capacity left or capabilities left after killing 1% of Gazans. So what he's saying now is that to get to their goal, they have to kill at least, if they keep the same amount of deaths, if it stays consistent, they have to kill at least like 2% of the entirety of Gaza for them to, at least 40,000 people, about 45,000 people for them to reach their goals. They have to kill 45,000 people. Okay. Yeah, they should stop now.
Have we asked to see Israel's targeting process or procedures?
I haven't seen it.
Have we asked
nope.
to see it?
I haven't asked to see it. I don't think that's something
I don't
that
care,
they
he
would
says.
share with us.
They would share their collateral damage percentage that they're working to if we were asking them to do so.
Well, they certainly, they've shared that in terms of, they point out, but one can say this is arguable, that they argue their collateral damage percentage compared with other conflicts shows that they are taking the issue of civilian casualties very seriously.
Also, maybe I could get.
But I think that's a difficult, that is a difficult one to.
I think it's a good way of holding them to account. And realistically, the UK normally operates, forgive me, Royston might correct me, but I believe the UK normally operates around a 3% collateral damage percentage. There's obviously ministerial sign-off for particular airstrikes where there may be requirement for a greater risk factor. Israel's must be operating at a 20, 30. I mean, in the past, in 2014, they said they were working at 20-something percentage. I'm just surprised that we don't know what they're targeting percentage.
20 or 30% collateral. That's crazy. That's crazy. Like 3% is already pretty insane. That just means 20 to 30% of the things that they're bombing were not things that they intended to bomb. And that's just generally. That means there's like bombings were like 90% of the things that they, or maybe even 100% of the things that they didn't intend to bomb are getting bombed. Oh my gosh. Working between 20 or 30%. 20 or 30% collateral. Israel has killed more. Yeah, that's kind of wild. How Israel has killed more civilians. Wait, is that here? Let me see. I want to check that for myself. Yeah, right now it stands at least November 2023 stands at 10,000 civilians have been killed in Ukraine. Israel has killed more civilians in Gaza than Russia has killed in Ukraine. Actually, Russia's less of a murderous state than Israel is by this one specific metric. According to the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, there have been 26,000 civilian casualties, and that was in August. But casualties doesn't mean deaths. That just means killed and injured. I know they like bombed the whole city. But I know they bombed a whole city, but like once again, Gaza City is leveled as well. Like Gaza City is leveled by now, like right now. So large scale humanitarian and rebuilding efforts done to fix the problem. But no, most Gazans who were there when the war began are still there, and Palestinians and Gazans like diaspora are still there. It's just like a lot of them have died, and a lot of them will continue to die as long as the world does nothing.
In terms of, their civilian collateral damage percentages, because that would be a direct way for us to have said to them, can you just get it down to below 10%?
That is, I mean, they do in conversation talk about what they think their percentages are. We don't think that's good enough, and we always push them to do more.
We do know what their percentages are, though.
We know what they say they have.
Okay. Final question from me before I move on to Brendan. During the hostilities in Gaza in 2014, your government decided to review licences for arms exports to Israel, and you committed not to grant any further licences until hostilities were ceased. I think there were 12 specific licences that you were concerned about at the time. Why has there been no review, cessation, pause, despite the fact there should be an automatic trigger that exists within the department to immediately suspend when there's a significant change on the ground?
Well, the way this works is that as I'm sure you know, that the grant of licences is done by the Department of Trade on the advice of the Foreign Office, and the Foreign Office has to look at compliance with international humanitarian law based on an assessment of the commitment that Israel has, the capability that they have, can they actually deliver on this capability, and the compliance. And that assessment is carried out on a sort of rolling.
Here, we can say this. When it comes to confirmed deaths, in each war, there have been more confirmed deaths of Palestinians than there have been of Ukrainians so far. Which is not to say that Ukraine has suffered less, but it's to speak of the scale of destruction that Israel is leveling on Gaza. And both countries need help.
Basis, and so it is sort of permanently reviewed, and where the circumstances to change and us to reach a different view, we'd advise the Department of Trade accordingly.
The immediate handbrake that, for example, after the terrorist attack in Kosovo, there was an immediate handbrake put in place in terms of sales of arms to Serbia. There was no immediate handbrake, as I am aware of, on this situation, despite there having been an enormous terrorist attack and then a response. And there hasn't been a specific
I think it's
review
because
of
the circumstances. I mean, the circumstances are different because of October the 7th being such a hostile attack on Israel, and the government's position that Israel has a right to defend itself and a right to try and stop Hamas from launching future terrorist attacks, that there wouldn't be odd to have an automatic handbrake. What you have to do is assess on an ongoing basis, which is what we're doing.
Israel has a full right to defend itself in international humanitarian law, but the British government has a duty to ensure that its export licenses are for arms exports as accurate as they can be. So you are not aware of any review within the system formally. Rolling basis, the point of a rolling basis that you have the emergency handbrake when it's needed.
Well, it's as you described. I mean,
you put one in place, which is why I'm surprised that there hasn't been one in 2014.
Yes, but
the casualties are so much higher this time.
Well, I think what I've described is what happens, which is it's a decision for the Department of Trade based on advice from the Foreign Office, and that process is properly gone through.
Okay. I just find it strange that when there were much lower levels of hostilities and activity, you put in place one as Prime Minister, and this time around, despite the circumstances being so much more serious, there hasn't been a review.
I think I've answered the question.
Let me take a wee.
Okay. All right. Okay. So no review for the weapons that they're giving to Israel. Not asking how they're bombing people to see if they're actually taking care to make sure that they're not just simply killing everyone. Yeah, okay. All right, buddy. This is going to be written about. You will be remembered, but not for good reasons. You will be remembered. Pretty sure South Africa just posited today that Israel doesn't have a right to defend itself from people it's occupying. I'm pretty sure international law says if you are actually occupying a group of people, no, you don't actually have a air quote right to defend yourself from those people. No, actually, from what I've seen, from what I've personally seen. Now I could be wrong in that, but if it is actually, if let's say it's like recognized in The Hague that Israel is occupying Gaza, then no, they don't actually have a right to defend themselves against the people that they are occupying. No. From, let's just say, like a clear-cut case of occupation. Let's just think of a random one. No, you actually don't have the right to defend yourself from those people. No, actually, you do not. The people who have the right to defend themselves would be the occupied peoples, not the occupying force. No. That is illegal. That's bombing. That's just killing people. That's not defense. It's offense, actually. That's how that works. Oh, sorry. I didn't see you there. If you're enjoying the content, hit the subscribe button. If you don't, it'll make Boo very sad. I know a bunch of you who are watching are not subscribed. Join the frenzy. You won't regret it. Thank you, Boo.